Keir Starmer is finished, but what have we learned from the Mandelson and Epstein affair? Revelations that Prime Minister Keir Starmer appointed Peter Mandelson as Britain's ambassador to the US despite knowing that he'd maintained his friendship with sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein have had and will continue to have a series of long-running consequences. First, and most obviously, Starmer's goose is cooked. He will likely survive the week for the very same reason he is extremely unlikely to survive the year. His rivals can read the tea leaves. As I predicted in the wake of Starmer's supposed landslide, which was in reality merely the British public punishing the Tories without any enthusiasm for Labour whatsoever, things were inevitably going to get worse for Labour with every day they spent in power. The pretenders to Starmer's wobbly throne know they're likely to get trounced in the Gorton and Denton by-election later this month, having hemorrhaged votes to reform and the Greens' emerging Green-Green alliance, on which more later. They also know that local government, mayoral, as well as Scottish and Welsh parliamentary elections are coming in early May. A scapegoat will be needed to explain the inevitable disaster that will unfold for Labour at those elections. Why depose Starmer now, only to be fed into the mincer for his mistakes a few months down the line? This is why the odds for Starmer leaving vary so widely between him leaving in the next couple of months, unlikely, and leaving by the end of the year, very likely as high as 70% in some cases. Secondly, and equally obviously, this entire scandal confirms something that anyone with eyes to see and ears to hear already knew. Labour is utterly devoid of talent. Even a weak and damaged Prime Minister will linger on because his potential replacements are, hard as that may be to believe, even less impressive. Indeed, his appointment of Mandelson was itself a symptom of the same problem. The Labour Party is so sure of serious operators that appointing a convicted paedophile's best friend seemed like a good idea. David Lammy, who in opposition described President Trump as a tyrant and a woman-hating neo-Nazi sympathizing sociopath, was this country's foreign secretary, whose most important job was to establish a productive working relationship with the US administration. Most of Labour's front bench should be stacking shelves at Lidl. Instead, they're running the country. Finally, and still equally obviously, the fallout from the Mandelson-Epstein episode has revealed in writing something that we all knew logically but had not previously heard a senior Labour figure say out loud. They are terrified of the Muslim vote. In an attempt to distance themselves from Mandelson, Health Secretary Wes Streeting released their private WhatsApp exchanges. Hidden among these was a telling comment. Quote, "I fear we're in big trouble here, and I am toast at the next election. We just lost our safest ward in Redbridge, 51% Muslim, Ilford South, to a Gaza independent. At this rate, I don't think we'll hold either of the two Ilford seats. There isn't a clear answer to the question, why Labour?" End quote. Labour's chickens are coming home to roost. For years, they fostered, encouraged and profited from religious sectarianism. A significant number of the seats they hold were won by en-bloc Muslim votes. Labour naively believed that these votes would stay with them no matter what, provided they continued to say and do nothing to offend this community. Their silence on grooming gangs, their failure to ban the Muslim Brotherhood, and their aggressive push to criminalize thought crime under the guise of combating Islamophobia are just some of the surface consequences. The problem, as they have discovered, is that unlike the Labour Party, whose only guiding principle is political expediency, the Muslim community has a clear and well-defined political agenda. Any delusions about this should have evaporated in the wake of the Israel-Hamas war, when it became clear that the overwhelming majority of British Muslims view themselves as part of the Ummah, a transnational Muslim community first and British second. It's not exactly surprising given that allegiance to the Ummah is directly prescribed in the Quran. This is why constituencies with high Muslim populations have elected a number of so-called Gaza independents, i.e. candidates whose primary concern is an issue that has very little to do with Britain at all. All of them unseated Labour MPs, by the way. Labour's reliance on this small but highly concentrated voting bloc unravelled quickly in the wake of October the 7th. The Gaza tail had grown accustomed to wagging the Labour dog and became outraged when Starmer failed to adopt the most extreme anti-Israel position possible. A new dog had to be found. Enter Zach Polanski. Across Britain, a green-green alliance is emerging whereby deluded blue-haired Extinction Rebellion types are joining forces with Muslim voters to defeat Labour. The short-term appeal of this unlikely coalition for both movements is clear. The Green Party gets a large cohesive voting bloc to lift it out of political irrelevance. For the Muslim vote, this is an excellent vehicle to force a Labour government into even more extreme forms of pandering. If this sounds scary and depressing, worry not. As I've talked about before, that things are so bad is in fact good news. When Starmer goes, he'll be replaced by somebody worse. That being the case, it's hard to see how we avoid an early election. The only question is whether an effective opposition will have formed by the time one takes place. That remains to be seen. If you enjoy these videos, remember that they're available as articles on my Substack days, weeks, sometimes months ahead of time. So head on over to konstantinkisin.com and subscribe today. The news doesn't just tell you what's happening. It often tells you what to think is happening. And these days, the biggest red flag isn't what's said, it's what gets left out. That's why I use Ground News. It's the only app that compares how the same story is covered across the political spectrum and show you what whole audiences are not being told. The blind spot feed is one of my favorite features. Every day, it flags upwards of 20 stories that are being ignored either by the left or the right. Follow along at ground.news/TRIGGERnometry. Like this, a new study from UC San Diego found that climate change cost almost twice as much as we thought because earlier estimates left out damage to the oceans. That's a pretty big update, and yet no coverage, literally zero, came from right-leaning outlets. Or this, a recent Gallup poll found trust in the media has hit a record low, with just 28% of Americans saying they trust newspapers, radio, and TV to report the news accurately and fairly. That's a staggering result, but if you only read left-leaning news, you likely never saw it at all. Go to ground.news/TRIGGERnometry to get 40% off their Unlimited Advantage plan, the same one we use, and stop being managed by the media.